What the story, guys, is Heritage here. This is my Wandavision review. First off, just want to say sorry it's been so long since the last video, but I wanted to do this after the end of the series, and because it was episodic, I had to wait this long to get to it, so like 8 weeks. And I'm glad I did, because I came very close to doing a review after episode 7, because that really annoyed me. But I said, no, hold off, wait till the whole thing's finished so you can actually judge it as a whole. Overall, I'd have to say that the show is, it's a flawed masterpiece, is the best way I'd put it. You know, on the one hand, there's some really, really good stuff in it, like really good comic book metaphorical storytelling where you get to convey notions about really, deep and personal and, metaphorical ideas and human conditions and traits and experiences, and tell it in a superheroic storytelling where you can actually convey it. In a very real sense, that's what this show is. It's a metaphor for Scarlet Witch Wanda dealing with her grief after losing vision. And at that level, the show's fantastic. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's probably some of the best storytelling I've seen. I think the best thing in this is the acting. Bettany and Olsen are just magnificent in it. It's absolute. I mean, the stuff that Olsen's been doing with just like an inflection or a glance to convey like the general depth of pathos that she's feeling at a particular moment, it's really good. You don't get to see this level of intimacy from her in the movies. So that, on the one hand, it's what really made this work. Unfortunately, this is juxtaposed with the progressive movement for one. I don't even like using that term because it's not progressive. This is just weird ideology that's been forced into the show, and it's generally centering around Photon, the real Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau, who's introduced in this. And initially she's introduced fantastically. It's a wonderful setup. But then they just go straight into Brie Larson Captain Marvel mode, and she starts lecturing people, and it just ruins the whole flow of the show. Thankfully, it's only a small amount, you'd say about 10% of it, but it is annoying to think that you have this show that's almost perfect, but it gets ruined by this injection of some form of ideology that they want to insist on putting forward out there. And it's almost like there's two competing factions in this. Like there seems to be one element of the show focusing mainly on Vision and Wanda, their family, and the mystery about what's going on in Westview, and then you have another group that seems to be wanting to be pushing this weird female empowerment thing that's not really very female empowering. And it's that side of the show that starts showing all these weird leaps of logic. And for instance, Haywood, the head of S.W.O.R.D., he ends up being a villain for some reason, and I really can't wrap my head around why. Like I don't understand his motivation for what they're trying to say he's doing in terms of with involving Vision, and his actions in the finale were just bizarre. He ends up getting arrested in the end, and I'm trying to figure out what to charge him with because I'm pretty sure he's the only person there with any authority to be there. So like I said, this is the more frustrating aspects of the shows. I mean, like if you can shovel all that stuff out of it, you'd have a really, really good show focusing on some really powerful storytelling. So all in all, I did enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'd say it's definitely must-watch television. I can understand why it's doing as well as it is. And it deserves to. Like I said, in terms of the production values, in terms of the acting, in terms of the overall story, it's fantastic. It's some of the best stuff out there. It's better than some of the movies in terms of what we've actually got. And like I said, the finale, the weird stuff with Haywood aside, was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. It's just when you step back, you get the feeling that there's some sort of, creative war going on or something. Maybe the show itself, when it was in production, maybe there was a shift in direction. Might have something to do with The Mandalorian and how successful that was. Because there is, I've always got a sense from watching the show, like I said, it's 8 episodes long. The first 2 were dumped in one go, and then it was weekly from then on. I got the feeling this thing was only ever meant to be a binge drop. I think it was meant to be all there in one go for, consumption in over 2 days. Because the first 2 episodes do not work as a standalone, which is why they didn't even bother releasing them back to back. Sorry, week to week. And while the rest of them worked out as weekly fare, I just can't help thinking that it's going to be much better, second watching in one go. Which thankfully now is where you guys are in now, the position you're in now at the moment, if you just want to watch it all. So if I break it down, I'll do the bad first because I'd like to end on the good stuff. The bad stuff is basically what they did with Monica Rambeau. Like I said, this seems to be like a separate storyline completely from the show. She is the daughter of Maria Rambeau from Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is name-checked in this, but you never see any appearance or anything. And this is the aspect of the show that is pure basically SJW nonsense and engaging SJW storytelling, which is basically, I'm awesome, everything else just happens around me. And that's not really good for a story arc because it isn't a story arc. And it's such a damn shame because the introduction of Monica was fantastic. She's one of the dusted. After the snap, she was one of the ones that disappeared. So when we first see Monica in this show, she's basically been reintegrated at her mother's bedside, where she was hoping to find out that she'd been recovered from cancer. She finds out that very moment that not only did her mother did survive, she lasted another 2 years, but she'd been dead for 3 years, and Monica has to deal with that revelation pretty much overnight. The sequence of her coming back and, the chaos that was ensuing around her in the hospital was fantastic. Like, it really gave an emphasis of what would happen if all the disappeared came back in one go. And the chaos that would ensue as people try and figure out what's going on and readjust back to modern life. This could have been used to tell some really good stories for her, because, it is an aspect of the Marvel MCU that, wasn't really touched on after Endgame, because that was pretty much our only sign of it, and perhaps what you've seen in Spider-Man Homecoming. Sorry, Spider-Man Far From Home. And the actress who plays Monica is brilliant. Like, she's got wonderful range when we first see her actually as one of the citizens in Westview. She, like I said, it's a good example of the range that she has, in order to portray the character. Like I said, the situation that she's in is interesting. She ends up going back to work like 3 weeks later. And they seem to imply that she's supposed to be the head of S.W.O.R.D., or at least was in the running for it. But because she disappeared, her mother's own protocols, because her mother helped set up S.W.O.R.D., was that nobody who's disappeared could actually end up in a position of authority, because they didn't know what actually happened to them, and there could be some threat down the road from, being compromised. So this is how Haywood gets the job instead. And like I said, they could have really focused on this, because Haywood even drops a hint at one stage that she has no idea what's happened in the last 5 years. The chaos that's been unleashed for all those people disappearing and what it's done to the world. And that's an aspect, as I said, that we've never really seen. And it could have been interesting to delve into that, to hammer home just how traumatic it was, how people had to restructure society so quickly with, 50% of all life disappearing. But it's all tossed aside for Monica to go off and end up being superciliously arrogant about, how things are being run in S.W.O.R.D. and generally being subordinate to Haywood at every opportunity she gets, which is ridiculous. Like, in any military organisation, this is the stuff that would get you sectioned straight off the bat. You'd be for it. This is the sort of thing that any normal writer would turn around and say, we can't have our character behaving like this, because they have to operate within the constraints of the operation that they're in. If you look at a contrast would be like Captain America. If you look at Captain America in Winter Soldier, when he had an issue with what was going on with Project Insight, he went on the run. He was a hunted man. He was persona non grata. We had this situation with Monica when she's basically getting supplies funneled to her by other people in S.W.O.R.D. who are basically engaging in what looks like an insurrectionist activity. This would not work in a military organisation. Like, every one of them would be locked up. Like I said, her storyline does definitely seem to be coming from the SJW camp, if there is 2 camps involved here. And like I said, it's probably exemplified best as when she ends up gaining her powers as, well, she was the original Captain Marvel in the comic, next to Marvel. And her ability is that she's able to basically become electromagnetic radiation, absorb it, manipulate it, and perceive it and use it. So that's what that was all about when she went through the barrier, and, she could see electromagnetic waves and stuff like that. But like I said, the most cringe-inducing moment in the whole series is when she's literally bursting her way through a barrier, and all we're hearing is this montage of people saying how awesome she is, and then she comes out the other side super heroic. It's just bad writing, And then we see something almost exactly the same happen to Darcy. Now, Darcy doesn't end up being, superhuman or anything, but she's gone from this, quirky assistant from 4 that was basically thirsting after guys to just this obnoxious bitch who just gets in everybody's face. I like Kat Denning. I think she's got a good bit of charm, and I was hoping that she would actually be like the Darcy from the Thor films, but we didn't get that here. Like I was saying earlier, this all seems to be it's all around episode 7. This is the one that really just goes a bit nuts, because we have all this SJW symbolism just all over it, which is just really frustrating. When Wanda expands the field, for instance, and it goes over the S.W.O.R.D. facility, and suddenly it turns into a circus, which seems to be a jab at, the military, or at least some sort of what they would call patriarchal figures. All the people in there turned into clowns, which speaks for itself as a metaphor. And this is where we have stupid scenes where, like, Kat Denning's character Darcy just knocks out the strongman, as if any girl can do that with one punch. Like I said, I liked her before in Thor. She was a fun character. She was quirky and fun. And now they've just turned her just an obnoxious, annoying pain in the arse. So it's moments like this that really kind of, I wouldn't say ruin the show, but they do make it a chore to get through, because you're just sitting here thinking that this isn't storytelling, this is lecturing. Like I said, the problem with SJW storytelling arcs is that there is no arc. I like Monica Rambeau as a character. I hope we get to see more of Photon in the future, but just hope she gets given to some writer who actually gives a damn about her and know what they're talking about. And most importantly, puts her on a hero's journey for her to actually become a better character by the end of the film. So that's the bad out of the way. That's pretty much the bad stuff that's going on. The great stuff, which saved this show, centers around the characters of it, Wanda and Vision. It's just an absolutely beautiful story. Like I said at the beginning of this, what comic books, superhero comic books, do really well is take really intimate, powerful, and emotional themes and storylines and use a big bombastic background to put them against so they can actually work as a metaphor. And this is done really well here. I think one of the better ones was probably the Halloween episode where with Sparky, the dog disappears, and when Sparky ends up dying and the kids ask Wanda to bring her back because they say to her that she has the power to resurrect people, which even seemed to throw the villain of this piece, which is Agnes, which is the nosy neighbour. And it's just a beautifully done piece of acting because it's something that Wanda obviously never thought of doing, and moreover, she knows she had the power to bring people back from the dead because she did that with Vision. Or at least that's what we've all been thinking at this stage. But this is the first time when she starts asking the question, should she bring people back from the dead? And when she tries to take to the kids that, everything has a time and that she doesn't really have the right to do this, for want of a better term. It's an interesting insight into a character that doesn't necessarily have to be constrained by human limitations. And that's fascinating. That's not something we get to see in other mediums. It's one of the things that comic books do really well. And Olsen pulls it off brilliantly. The haunting look in her eyes as she realises what she can do, and whether she should be doing it, and the questions it asks of her at all. It's just really well done by Elizabeth. And like I said, it's some of the best stuff in this show is her acting and Bethany's acting because they're giving some really meaty stuff here and they relish it. And it's stuff like that that really makes this a joy. I mean, when we get to the finale and we get to see the citizens of Westview released from Wanda's control, and we get to hear the stories of them. And it's like this has been done earlier on in other episodes as other characters are temporarily freed. But we realise then that Wanda is keeping them in almost a perpetual state of pain and hurt, as they're essentially puppets to her will as she tries to build this perfect little idyllic getaway for herself. I mean, there's a scene where Dottie, which is the blonde one, who was the kind of the matriarchal one in the 1950s version, comes up to her at the finale and she basically says to her, she's not begging, but she's kind of pleading, saying, look, I don't want you to let us go, but, my little 8-year-old daughter's been stuck in our bedroom for months on end. Can we just write some sort of scene for her so she can be friends with your kids so she can get out of her bedroom? Stuff like that. I mean, she's not even trying to escape. She's kind of resigned to being stuck under this thrall of Wanda. But she's trying to get some form of release that she can, trying to help her daughter in any way that she can reason. And that's incredible. That's like a metaphor for abuse and being stuck in an abusive relationship. And again, Olsen nails it when you look at her reaction. She realises that what she's been doing, she knows it's wrong. And she's starting to realise what it's actually costing people and the pain, that the hurt that she's done to them. Even when you've got other characters coming up to them, like Deborah Jo Rupp's character. I can't remember her name exactly from the first one. But she's the girl from that 70s show. And I mean, she just comes out right and says to her, look, if you don't let us go, just let us die. Because what we're going through is an absolute torture. This is when you see the full ramifications of what Scarlet Witch has been doing subconsciously to the whole town. And by this stage that she's going to take down the barrier, she's going to release them all. But it's done very, very well. Like I said, this is the side of the stuff where the writing really shines. And it really makes me think there's two teams at work, because I find it deeply ironic that what Wanda's doing here is super villainess territory. But because it's coming from a position of such pain and grief and hurt, I can almost forgive her because I know it's human. Whereas I look at the stuff that Monica's been doing in terms of flouting the chain of command and trying to implicate other people in what she wants to do as well. And that just looks straight like, super villainess herself. And that's just coming from a position of arrogance. So this is where the writing really shines. It's on that side of the things. And like the sitcom aspect of it, it very good. If, like I said, when you watch from the beginning, the intrigue that it builds as you're trying to figure out why this is here, what's going on. It seems to be really clear that in the first couple of episodes, Wanda doesn't seem to even be subconsciously aware of what's going on. She tends to just become more malicious when somebody threatens her. And when I mean threaten her in terms of disrupting the world that's been built around them in the terms of 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s TV shows. So, for instance, when the beekeeper guy that came up through the drain, and she, you know, we never see him again, by the way. I'd love to know what happened to that fella. He seems to have got right now the continuity. But this was an attempt by the outside world to try and find out what was going on. And she just basically, it was the end of one of the episodes where she sees him coming up the street, just goes, no, and then just reverses backwards like a TV show, the time, and then works forward from there. It's like selective editing. And so she's able to do this in life in order to keep going the veneer of the perfect life. And that's what it is. Like the sitcom works really well as a metaphor for what she wants, which is just to have a happy, ideal life with the husband, the 2 kids, and a nice home. The brilliance of this aspect as well is that it really shows off the acting chops of Bettany and Olsen. You really do a great job doing the Dick Van Dyke Show in the 1950s, what looks like I Love Lucy as well, in the Brady Bunch in the 70s. I think there was Malcolm in the Middle was in there. You had Modern Family, I think. Family Ties, all stuff like that. It really did give it a great excuse for them to launch into the range of acting that they were capable of. And like I said, it really helped. In a way, the whole storyline is pretty much about kind of like a therapy session for Wanda to try and deal with the grief of what's happened to her in regards to Infinity War and Endgame. And basically all the stuff that's happened in the last couple of years in relation to losing her brother, her lover twice, and finally her own life when she was dusted. Because at this stage, let's remember, she's only back 3 weeks herself. She really is the focal point of the show. So although it's called Wandavision, and although Vision as a character does have a good character arc himself, and Paul Bettany has plenty to get into, it's really more about Wanda becoming the Scarlet Witch. And that's basically how the series ends in the finale that just happened today. She basically fully takes on that mantle. So I presume this is the character we're going to see in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness later on, when that gets released in the cinemas. I gotta say, I really love the outfit. You know, like there was a tease in the Halloween episode where she wears the classic outfit, and it is goofy looking, let's be honest, but no worse than what Chris Evans got away with in Captain America: The First Avenger, when he was wearing like a facsimile of the original outfit. But I gotta say, the final out for her as the Scarlet Witch looks fantastic, really does look well on her, and gotta give props to the design department there. And I really hope that they use that outfit in the next movie. So if I was to say why somebody should watch this show, it's really for Wanda's arc. This is it, like I said, as a metaphor for grief, for, you know, loss and how you deal with it. It's really good, and it's a very human story for her. I think if you focus on that, you'll come away from this as a happy camper. But that's not to say that there's no other stuff in here that's very good. Like I said, I mean, Paul Bettany as basically a reborn Vision. He has no idea what's going on, and it's basically a good couple of episodes where we see him go through an arc as he starts to discover what's been done to him. He's the most autonomy of all the characters that surround Wanda, generally because she wants him to be the Vision that she remembers, and consciously or unconsciously isn't going to mess with him. What he basically is by the end of the show is all that's left of the Soul Stone, the Mind Stone that was influencing Wanda when she was under the experimentations of Hydra back in Age of Ultron. There's probably a lot of back and forth memory engrams involved as well, because Wanda was able to resonate with Vision. You know, they could feel each other. And we've seen as well in Infinity War that, you know, like, she's the only one that could take him out, and she was connected to him when he died. So, I mean, there's all sorts of scope there for saying whatever was the full potential of him or personality could be in her somewhere, and that's what she brought out. I'm not sure if they actually come out and say it, but he's basically the dream of Vision, the best idea of what he was and what she remembers. And it's through Vision that we get to see behind the scenes of what's going on in Westview. You know, like, he's the one that goes out to the barrier. He sees that the further you get away from Wanda's influence, the less control and agency people have. So when she's right out near the edge of the town, some people are just stuck in loops where they're just continually hanging up washing. You know, like, there was a wonderful scene where he just passes a woman and he sees her, just as I said, just continually putting up washing, but she's crying. There's a tear coming down her eye, and you can just kind of sense the torment that the poor woman is in, because God knows how long she's been doing that. And Vision is still the soulful character that he was in Age of Ultron, that he was in Infinity War and in Endgame. Well, wasn't Endgame, sorry. But you know what I mean, in the Marvel Universe, he always had a more nobility about him, a sense of right and wrong. And it's clear to him what Wanda's doing, even though it basically gives him what he's want, a family, a wife. It's wrong, basically, to his eye. What he's seeing is that it's cruel. And this culminates in a showdown with him and Wanda as they get in a massive argument about what's going on and whether she's really aware of it or not. The acting from Bettany and Olsen in that episode is just fantastic, and it's one of the highlights of the show to me. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen with Vision's character, because Vision actually exists in two forms now, because his original dead body that was left over from Infinity War, that was effectively reanimated by Hayward, and he sent him into the barrier to try and take out Wanda, basically, and Vision. And that resulted in a really spectacular fight between the two of them in the final episode, and which is oddly resolved by a philosophical debate about who is the Vision. And, if he's supposed to destroy the Vision, he's essentially what's left of the Vision, so he had to destroy himself, I think. But he just flies off, and we never see what happened to him. So I was kind of hoping by the end of this episode that he would be integrated with the White Vision, and that you would basically get a return of the original Vision. But seeing as we don't see, White Vision get absolutely destroyed, I presume it's up in the air down the road whether they can do something like that. But either way, I hope Paul Bettany does come back, because he's really good in the role, and I think he's made it his own now in this series. The best aspect beside that is Catherine Hamm. She plays the nosy neighbour Agatha, or Agnes. On many occasions, she steals the show. She's absolutely fantastic. She's a wonderful actress, and I mean, anytime she's on the screen, something's up. And she conveys the craftiness of the character, where you're trying to figure out what's going on, but it's not being revealed. She basically is the villain of this. She's another witch from the Salem witch trials days. She basically killed her coven, stole all their power, and that allowed her to live as long as she has. And she's after Scarlet Witch because she's trying to figure out how she did what she did, because pursuit of power is pretty much what she has. And she has the Darkhold. Now, the Darkhold is the same book from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., if you remember correctly, the one that gave us Ghost Rider, that gave us the animated live model Decoy. And it's a long-standing item from the Marvel Universe proper of the comic books. If I actually remember from my comic book collecting days, it's the Book of Chthon, really, and he's imbued it with part of his power. So as long as the Darkhold exists, he exists, and he hopes to use it someday to come back into the world. And Chthon is actually tied into Wanda's birth in the comics. It's not mentioned in the TV show, but it's just to give you an idea that there was always a link between, the Elder Gods, chaos magic, and Wanda, and the Darkhold. And Agatha's the one that's been messing around behind the scenes to pull the strings of Wanda to try and get to the stage to realise her power as the Scarlet Witch, which she hopes to absorb and use herself. So the whole show comes down to a showdown between Wanda and Agatha Harkness. And it's a good battle. It's really enjoyable. There's some good emotional plays at work in it as well. The realisation from Wanda that the only way she can win is to basically collapse the barrier in the end, and that means she's going to lose her family. But at this stage, as a moral human being, she sees she just can't leave it up anymore, looking at what it's doing to the citizens of Westview. So it's a good, satisfying battle. Wanda assumes the mantle of the Scarlet Witch, and she leaves for parts unknown. And that's the end of the show, basically. Monica Rambeau ends up having a discussion with a Skrull, so that seems to be leading into a notion that she's going to be in Captain Marvel 2. And there's a second after credit scene where Scarlet Witch is basically looked like she's in a cabin somewhere out in, I don't know, Alaska or something like that. It could be. It's in the northern climes anyway. And she's going through the Darkhold, I presume, to try and find some way to be able to bring her family back into the real world. It's kind of a baffling ending because we were told that there was supposed to be a uber-scale cameo that was going to appear in this, that was supposed to be on the same level of Luke Skywalker at the end of The Mandalorian second season. That didn't happen here. I don't know who was spreading that around. That seemed to come from an official source, but there wasn't a major reveal or a major cameo. I myself thought it was going to be Doctor Strange. I thought that was going to lead straight into the end. Into his movie that's coming up. But the way this was ended now, I'm not actually sure if Scarlet Witch is actually not going to be the villain of that film, because the Darkhold is a corrupting influence, and she is desperate to get her kids back, and that's all the ingredient you need for a classic villain. I mean, hell, it's not a million miles away from how Doctor Doom got started. So I don't know, it seems to leave more questions about what's going to go on with the Doctor Strange film, particularly as it's being done by Raimi. Raimi is somebody that would have the clout to be able to make the film he wants. So if we're going to have Scarlet Witch as the villain in that, instead of being an assistant or, you know, someone to whom Doctor Strange is a mentor of, that could be interesting. Because like I said, up to now I was expecting Scarlet Witch to be, you know, mentored by Doctor Strange. It would help teach her the mystic arts. But now I don't know. So it could go anyway in that regard. And that's basically it. Like I said, I definitely advise people to watch it. I really enjoyed it. As I said, if you can just ignore the shoehorned in nonsense that we've been seeing. Like I said, this is stuff that's been in comics for years, you know, like, and it's really turned off the readership. Considering the fact that it's only about 10% of what's in this film, I can't help thinking if they tried to course correct through it. Like I was saying, this definitely feels like it should have been a binge drop instead of just an episodic one. But what's happened with The Mandalorian and the fact that it garnered more and more support because of the episodic nature of that show, I can't help thinking that's why they made that decision there. But maybe it also gave them a chance to affect some changes behind the scenes as well in terms of what way they went with the direction of the story too. So I don't know, it just definitely feels like there's some sort of weird tug of war going on from the creative side. It kind of reminds me of Endgame. Like, before Endgame came out, there was notions that Captain Marvel was going to have a much bigger part in that film. But essentially, she just shows up, takes out Thanos' ship, and he punches her out of the film. So, I mean, it definitely looked like somebody changed the decision there. So maybe we've seen something similar here too. Either way, the meat of this, the story of Wanda and Vision, their attempt to have an idyllic family life and, you know, the intrigue behind it, it definitely works as a story. And 8 episodes is enough for you to get into this without it taking away significantly from your spare time. So I'd recommend you to check it out. So there you go. That's my review of Wandavision. Like I said, a mixed bag. It's, as I said, a flawed masterpiece. When it's good, it is fantastic. There's some wonderfully creepy little stuff in this. Like I said, one of the earlier episodes set in the 50s where Deborah Rowe Cupp's character is practically begging her to stop her husband from choking to death in front of her. That is just brilliant. It just completely twisted that entire episode, which up to then was just a traditional 1950s sitcom. When it's bad, it is cringe-inducingly bad. But that's such a small minority of what this show is. You can forget about that and, you know, deal with the happy steak of what you got in front of you. So there you go, guys. That's my review of Wandavision. If you like it, let us know what you think about it. Like and subscribe, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.